Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Chewy, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. Just so people know and people can come and join us and get involved quickly, we've got Dr. Anna Brooks coming up with us in just a couple of ticks. If you have a specific question around COVID or COVID-related issues, Anna is live with us, and we would happily take some questions and comments either in the chat of the platform you're watching us on, or you can tweet at us and just use the hashtag BHN, and we can probably see that as well. But I do remember, and help me remember this one, Chewy, if no one else does, asking about BQ 1.1 and rat testing, and if it kind of works with rat testing. So yes, we will be having a chat with Anna shortly and getting kind of an update on where we're at, because we seem to be getting some mixed messages. On one hand, everything seems to be looking pretty good. On the other hand, when you look at the numbers, it's like, well, maybe some personal experience can be brought in from the last 7 days, actually. How are you, by the way? First day back at work?
Yeah, look, very full on day at work as well, and I hit a wall at 3 o'clock.
Right.
Just that fatigue sets in halfway through, and it's not like I've got a hugely active job. It's just a lot of talking to people and that sort of thing. But yeah, even that just really kicked the shit out of me today.
Yeah, well, it's something for you, Chewy. If politically we just mentioned, just so you know, how will BHN see our tweets if Chewy keeps getting banned?
I've only been banned once.
Yeah, but with Elon taking over, you'll probably have 2 accounts shortly, because Elon's coming back and freeing everybody up. So that's pretty good.
I've got my emergency accounts that I dip into at times of trouble. So
let me say again, you know that we got kind of stood up last night for very good reason. Nelson MP Rachel Boyack, I think it is, was going to be joining us to talk about the plain language bill, and got held up in an event. These things happen, and couldn't make it, so we rescheduled for tonight. As you've probably seen in the thumbnail or the rest write up for tonight's episode. Not entirely sure why we've been stood up tonight, but we have. So even though I've promised we were going to talk about that tonight, we will not be talking about that tonight. And to be honest with you, after 2 nights, probably not with Rachel at all. Maybe.
That's a shame. It would have been really good to talk about where that bill has come from, and lots of cool things could have happened there. Very disappointing.
I think last night was the first night we'd been stood up, and I think getting stood up by the same person 2 nights in a row, that still kind of feels like it's only one stand up. So I'm still going to just stick with one person. Only one person's ever stood. Yeah, they've stood us up twice, but only one person. So we're not chasing that. We'll leave that there. We had a pretty good conversation about it last night anyway, and I think we explained everything we probably needed to explain. So apologies if you're here to hear about the that bill. That will not be a topic of conversation for tonight, just so you know. What will be a topic of conversation a bit later on is we will be talking about the David Farrier, Sean Plunket stoush that's still going on, and it's peculiar. Is it an okay word to use, Chewy? It's a peculiar situation.
It's really weird. I mean, Sean's done some dumb shit. Like, there's the platform. Just in general, and it just seems to be that, you know, it's weird to watch this car crash of once respected journalist just completely flush his reputation in real time. But yeah, he's gone off the deep end with this Farrier stuff. It's truly bizarre.
It's been very interesting as well to hear him say things like self-styled journalist, so-called journalist, and I'm like, I mean,
he literally is people say
that about Sean Plunket, and he gets offended because he's a journalist, as far as I'm aware. And I mean, when I talk about journalists, I know we can all work as journalists, but when I talk about journalists, I typically talk about have the qualification of being a journalist. And I would understand David Farrier has been around for long enough, working in TV and news and stuff, that he is actually a qualified and trained journalist. So God only knows what Sean Plunket's talking about when he talks about self-styled or so-called.
He tacked on after that of like so-called filmmaker, and it's like he literally has 2 films.
Yeah.
One of them is you're trying to lash him over, so you can't say self-styled or so-called when you've actually done the thing.
Just
very, very bizarre.
so-called professional broadcaster Sean Plunket came across to that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And actually, because I'm a bit confused about a couple of the details, so we'll just have a look at it, get your guys' thoughts on it, and then we'll go from there. But I think let's get into it, because we have been looking a little bit at COVID again this week. As I've said before, we don't want to be the show that kind of brings everyone down all the time. And as I've said earlier, I had family members over in Australia a few months ago, and they're like, "Oh, it's fantastic. No one's talking about COVID, and it wasn't in the news, and we didn't have to worry about it." I don't think anyone told COVID that, but there is a vibe from people that, like, we've heard enough, get on with life. We don't want to be the show to necessarily bring you down and that, but we do want to be the show that's accurate and gives you good information. And looking, I always get it wrong, looking this way here, at someone who might want to speak some personal experiences about COVID still being out there. We thought we'd get a couple of guys on this week, and one of the guys / using that word as a gender neutral term is from the University of Auckland, Dr. Anna Brooks. Anna, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. How do you feel about the term guys when I'm talking about a female?
I'm down with it.
Down. That's I'm down with the kids. Is that the same thing?
I use it a bit too. Yeah, but yeah. I guess you sort of do that thing. Am I allowed to do that? I think, hey team, that might be the one that slips in there instead of guys, because you're
actually my example. When I look at our text messages to each other, I realize every time I text you, I typically go, "Hey man." Because in New Zealand, I'm looking at them now. Hey man, it's like in New Zealand, there's these terms which mate, man. It feels like it's just a term for a person, you know.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't know. All right. Hey, we want to talk. Oh, now you probably got the gist of it. You were in the waiting room while we were doing that setup. The little fella beside me is day 7. First day back to work was yesterday because he caught the lurgy last week. So he might have some interpersonal questions to ask you about it. But
I've been doing so well. I've been
2 years without
and diving, and it got me.
I'll ask a personal question. Did you test to exit?
No, I didn't, because I'd run out of rat tests.
So you're probably still raging positive, by the way.
Yeah, I figured as much.
Isn't it either 24 hours after symptoms have gone, or you're testing negative? Are those the two exit the rules?
Or you can just take a test and be sure that you're not going to infect anyone. It's quite easy.
But can't you also be testing positive for weeks and weeks afterwards because there's something in your system?
Yeah, it's called COVID. Sorry, I'm being facetious. No, so it's quite confusing. But if you systematically do it like a scientist does, and you start taking tests because you don't want to infect anyone, you'll find that most people test positive up to about day 10. And there's strong correlation in the literature that a positive rat, you're likely infectious. Like, the blurred lines become a bit more along, people who have symptoms that keep persisting, or you're not really that well, and so people can test positive weekly for longer, and so there is an absolute gray area. But if you're someone who goes through a sort of a standard get sick, get symptoms, your symptoms kind of recover, then you're best to test, because you will test negative and then you can bail out of your isolation. But most people who have done this and tracked it are absolutely raging positive on day 7, like not a week positive, absolutely positive. And that's going to correlate to being infectious. And we've also seen, if you correlate that to a saliva test, for example, your saliva is a better indicator of being infectious, and they absolutely, you're still likely infectious. So it's just been madness that there was no update in, sort of being able to test exit. Sure, it would create problems for people that don't ever test negative, but I think you can start to use your judgment versus the other way around, where you will be going back into a workplace, no one bothers masking, and you might infect someone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, as far as what I've been doing, I take public transport, so I've been masked up the whole time and wearing masks with customers and stuff like that. But even Dan, I was just looking at the text I got this morning. Your COVID isolation period has ended. If you feel well enough, you can return to your normal daily activities, including work.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was absolutely knocked on my ass for 3-4 days. Just felt vile.
Yeah.
And as someone that doesn't often get sick, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the real thing. But then ultimately, at the moment, I feel fine. I am back to normal.
Yep.
So yeah, hopefully a little bit of caution. But yeah, I would have tested to go back to work if we had the rats, but with both me and my partner down, we chewed through those pretty quickly.
Exactly. And because the other thing is you may well have been negative. It's just that a vast majority of people are not, because, like you can have that delay when you start to turn positive, and then that delay comes out the other end as well. It's very, very common. Like we've seen it. Anyone who tracks themselves will see that they're categorically not negative at day 7, apart from if you clear it quickly. So, I mean, and, if you're cautious about it, sure. But why do you think we have it circulating? We have it circulating because people are out there spreading it, right? So, yeah. I mean, we've been banging on about this for a while, that test to exit should be the policy, because then anyone who's not infectious is back to work faster. It just makes sense. But without a readily available rats, because they're not that readily available, are they? It's hard, especially when you're locked up. It's like, who's going to go get them for you and all the rest of it?
So I like to understand really clearly what I should do in a situation.
Mm-hmm.
What I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that for the most, if you're testing positive, even if it was on day 7, 8, or 9, you're more than likely still infectious.
Yeah.
Because that's not the advice from government, correct?
No. Don't test because you might find out you're positive and therefore you can't go back to work, is the advice.
The advice from government is either 24. So in other words, if you have symptoms on day 7, day 8, you should still isolate, but it's 24 hours after symptoms, you have no symptoms, or testing negative. So actually that's not good advice if you're, like you're saying, doing it as a scientist, does it?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it seems to be just kind of straightforward that, if your rat's raging bright, do you really think that is safe? Because everyone has a 7-day rule, and that's the thing. We're not created equal, right? So, of course, if you're symptomatic, you're not going to be up to leaving your house. But as I say, it would have just made sense that we had a test to exit rule, and then anyone who has the long tail and is truly infectious doesn't go out and infect other people, and vice versa. Some people clear it real quick, and therefore they're not in isolation. So, but it is what it is. COVID's over, remember. So, that mysterious thing that's circulating that's not COVID, yeah.
I mean, just super anecdotally, I noticed when I sort of posted up on Twitter and that I had it, the following week, I noticed so many of my Twitter mutuals and that sort of thing also posting up positives and and that sort of thing. So it's definitely still circulating around.
Oh, totally.
But the masks are out the window. Like on the bus this morning, full school run. I was the only person wearing a mask.
And ironically, you possibly, we'll say likely not, but possibly were someone who could have been infectious, and you're the only one with the mask on.
Yeah.
This is the thing I've been talking to my kids about. It's the whole seatbelt routine. And I don't want to bang on about this, but we don't wear a seatbelt for the 999 times we're in the car when we don't need it. We wear a seatbelt every time for the one time we do. So that's what I talk to them about masks. 999 times you come across a person you don't need a mask. That's not why you wear it for the one time you come across someone when you're wearing a mask that you do need it, and that's the insurance policy, if you will.
Yeah, and let's talk about the reasons that we want to still raise awareness out here, and the word is raising awareness. It's not being dooms, putting the doom vibes everywhere. It's raising awareness. What's really sad is the people who may literally think COVID is over. They absolutely think there is no risk, and they end up in hospital or die, because those things are still possible for vulnerable people. And that's what bothers me, is that it's when the national message is that we've moved on and it's not a problem. There are people that are going to categorically believe that, and that is concerning. So what we're raising awareness about is not, people can move on and do what they want to do and have, all the privileges that they go back to, partying, socializing, all of those things. No one's saying that, sure, if you want to be that way, but remembering that all those sort of basic human rights, like accessing healthcare, food, going to work and school, is no choice for a vulnerable person. They are at high risk. And so essentially what we're seeing and hearing right now is that, the vulnerable people, meaning if your last vaccine was ages ago, or if you haven't had COVID, you're a sitting duck and you're likely to be the next infectee because there's less protections everywhere. So we're going to see that slow burn, whether it ramps up, but it's definitely going to be a slow burn. At the minimum, it's a slow burn, but who knows whether it will ramp up. And depending on which variants are circulating where and whether they take hold, because yes, there's hybrid immunity, but my other point is hybrid immunity is an outcome, not a target. Don't say, let's go get my dose so then I'm protected with hybrid immunity. There is no level of infection that is safe. It's unfortunate that we then live with, and then that is the outcome. And the other thing that is not publicized nearly enough is the dangers of reinfection. And as new, let's say we're going to be in this situation because there's multiple variants out there. You're less likely to get one after the other, let's be honest. But let's say the first Omicron wave we had, maybe those people are more susceptible to the new variants because the new variants are closer aligned to BA.5. They had Omicron ages ago, back in March. And so now round 2 is coming up. We don't know enough about the variability in humans as to who is susceptible to a reinfection. We know it's not likely to be everyone, but we don't know who, and we don't know whether it's your second infection, third, fourth, or who knows how many infections that you'll end up with long COVID. Where long COVID risk is always there, because the way we see it, it's kind of like this recovery trajectory that you get an infection and it is a black box. We don't know when you're the harms that have been done, probably silently, you might not feel them. We don't know how long that takes to go back to baseline and resolve. So if you get another whack to the immune system during your recovery, that could be what your trigger is to get long COVID. Or you might get a cold, or you might get some other infection. You know what I mean? Like and those things compound, which is why, we're sort of raising awareness that it's not ideal to keep getting infected by this virus. And our vulnerable communities are now locked up more than ever and are absolutely petrified of getting infected because they've now got lowest immunity ever if they are not eligible for another booster, yada, yada, yada. It's those people we're speaking out for. It's not the, woo, I'm off and living my life again. Do what you like. But, it's more that the fact that someone's got to speak out for the vulnerable communities and the fact that it's not, getting an infection is not a target. It should not be a target.
I did notice a bit of chatter around sort of like, you get vaxxed and boosted, and then it's ideal if you pick up a real infection, and then that's that hybrid immunity, and it's somehow better. And I was just like, that doesn't sound right to me at all. That is not something I'm going to go out and lick doorknobs and
exactly.
You're coughing? Please cough into my mouth. I need it.
No, there's no infection that it is suggested that you get it to, create better immunity. It just happens to be the outcome. And that's why the narrative around hybrid immunity becomes a bit annoying. Like, we've all had it, so we've got hybrid immunity to protect us. Meanwhile, those that have been shielding from society are just sitting there going, oh my God, what? Like, now I have to get this because now no one cares about protecting me. So that's kind of the place we find ourselves now, is that there's just no protection for anyone who wants to not get infected, because there's this tendency for society to go, well, I had it, I was fine, woo, let's carry on.
Yeah.
And the lack of empathy and projection is just, it's mind-blowing that people can't sort of put themselves in another situation. Because because the death rates are going to be much lower. No one's denying that, and vaccinations are protective to a certain extent, but you can't protect against the constant reinfections unless you take extra measures.
Yeah.
Hey, Anna, what are your thoughts around the numbers that are being reported versus the numbers that are actually out there at the moment? We did this, we've done numbers a couple of times this week, and today for the first time I had a look at wastewater and the data and the results coming out of wastewater. And if you have a look at the I don't know if you call it the amount of COVID or COVID shedding, whatever the correct term is, that's in the wastewater, it matches about the same level of what was in the wastewater in the first week of March. The first week of March, that equated to 7,500 people a day getting COVID. When you look at the number of people in hospital right now, it equates to about the same number of people in hospital in the middle of May. Middle of May, there was about 7,500 people a day getting COVID. We got told on Monday that there was 20,000 people last week, which is 3,000 a day. But David Welsh came out in the news saying that it was probably more like between 40 and 50,000. So at least anecdotally, all those things line up to seem to say we're probably, let's say 5,000 to 7,000 cases a day at the moment. Yet we're being told officially it's 20,000 a week. What do you want to say to that? Do you want to speak to that?
I mean, it's a difficult situation when we've got terrible surveillance and, or shall I say, none. We've got wastewater, yes, but I think all you can do is extrapolate, right? Because we don't really have a good handle on that. And I mean, I don't know what the numbers are of how many planes land every day. That'll be a good indicator and a lag, right? Every time a plane lands will be a fresh batch. And so our seeding rate is likely to be quite different than when we had closed borders. So it's difficult to get a handle on, and there's still going to be asymptomatic infections, or people who don't report. I mean, you hear it all the time. Oh, cough, cough. Oh, it's not COVID. So those type of scenarios are going to happen. So I mean, of course, wastewater is going to be a good indicator. So all we can do is extrapolate, but it's whether or not how much that is influenced by and is going to change by the constant influx of planes. And we'll have fun events like the university students going back to their hometowns and soon enough, and spreading back in those directions. So I mean, of course, we're not seeing some like huge spike, but it's we're seeing infections, and I think what we're seeing in other countries is that at least the rate of reinfection is going up. Like what we saw with BA.5 is the reinfection rate was relatively low off the back of BA.2. But when you've got multiple ones in the country at the same time, and then there's what else coming in, those reinfection rates are going to flap around. And so, we
had thousands of cruise ship people traipsing around in the last week, and anecdotally down here in Dunedin, they were saying a lot of people turning up to pharmacies with flu-like symptoms, been on buses and doing all the tourist things, and we've got 100 cases on the boat that we're not at, but we're fine.
Yeah. Do you mean a floating petri dish?
Oh, absolutely. What better way to blow out the cobwebs of a global pandemic to hop straight on a cruise ship?
Like have we learned nothing? Like 2020 is like when COVID spread on cruise ships. Oh, forget that. Let's do it again.
Do you feel at times, and I hear a little bit of this in your voice, do you feel like you're taking crazy pills sometimes of just like, what is everyone doing? Look at the data. Look at what we're saying. And then everybody's just like, but the masks, they fog up my glasses. It's inconvenient.
Totally. Like, I like to joke about it, in that disgusting parasite toxoplasmosis. I took this analogy, and then I saw someone else stole it, so it's clearly not my analogy. But toxoplasmosis is a creepy parasite that needs a cat to reproduce.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Right. So it needs to get into a cat to finish its life cycle. And when a mouse gets infected, the mouse is like, "Woo, don't care about cats anymore." And so we call it like the toxoplasmosis brain, that, you've had your infection, come on, and the water's boiling, like it's that, because that's what it seems to be like. It's like, I've had my thing, I'm risk averse, it's fine. So it does feel a little bit like that at times. I mean, okay, it's human nature as well. We're all over this, absolutely. But the crazy part does enter your mind, right? Like, let's all jump on a cruise ship again, because that's fine with a virus that spreads.
So here's a question for both of you guys. It's more of a sociological question, perhaps, or a societal question than a science question, Anna. But how do we do this? So I talk to my kids and I'm like, look, we are not going back to 2019. Like, if we've got scratchy throats, we stay home, right? And I still see and hear about kids going to school with coughing and coughs and colds and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, how do we get this message across that actually I still wear a mask, and I haven't had to do this yet, but as soon as someone gives me some grief for wearing a mask, I'm going to say, oh yeah, because I got COVID. I'm wearing a mask because I got COVID. Obviously, I wouldn't be going out, and then see how they react, which will probably be like, what are you doing out if you've got COVID? I'm like, well, if I didn't have COVID and I didn't have a mask on, if I didn't know I had it, what would be the difference? But that's the, you run a narrative in your head about how you're going to deal with an arsehole. That was the narrative I was going to run in my head about how
you just give them the eyes, like, I'm judging you back, that you're judging me. Kind of thing.
Well, I haven't. Like I said, I haven't had that, but I guess what I'm wondering is, what do we do? I mean, I want to figure out how to, like, so what we've done is we've basically said, when the risk is higher than the inconvenience, then you wear a mask. We went up to Auckland on a plane, we wore a mask. We go to the supermarket, we wear a mask. We're probably actually wearing a mask everywhere we did. There's probably nowhere where the risk is lower than the inconvenience, because it's a mask. It's not a big deal. So that's sort of the philosophy we're living in. And it's not actually stopping us from doing anything. It just means when we do it, we're wearing a mask. But, and I'm not saying that our system is the one that other people should use, but how do we get across to society, actually, this isn't gone. We do need to look after our neighbor. And I also want to look after you. How do we get that message across?
I think it's difficult, because the pandemic has never been about morbidity and long-term health impacts. It's always been about keeping people out of hospitals and dying. And when that's not the largest outcome, of course it's still happening. It's still tragic that it is happening. But society is now normalized to the fact that there'll always be some death. But the rest of it, of morbidity and never mind getting long COVID. Long COVID is just one outcome, right? The other outcomes are a month of lost productivity because your brain's just a bit slow. Or, you're fatigued for a month. Like there's a lot of, different categories. Or you drop dead after 6 months. That happens. You won't be a COVID-19 statistic. You just accidentally dropped dead. Like, and this is the thing, your risks of cardiac problems, clotting problems, strokes, all of those things go through the roof when you've had an infection. And there's just no publicity about that, because, it's called scaremongering and all the rest of it. But it's awareness. It's awareness that, when you're infected, no matter how mild it may have been for you, you can't see the insides of your blood vessels and whether or not you have had the damage and your immune system coped with it. We don't know. So it is really challenging. I think, there's no real straight answer here, other than, that, viruses are among us and always have been. And this one's a pretty nasty one. And is it going to be at the point at which it mutates and causes more death is when we care again? Or, I'd say it's going to be a tricky one. We'll see, in other countries, mask wearing just becomes part of daily life. And I don't think
I was watching the All Blacks playing in Tokyo, and it was like 80-90% of people in the stadium were masked. And that's because it's part of their culture already. I want to ask you this question as well, Anna, and I'm actually thinking about Chewy when I ask this question as well, because you've just talked about some pretty serious potential things from people who have COVID that could happen further down the track. So my question is, so people don't feel like they've just been filled with a whole bunch of concerns without solutions, is what can people do to help with those things? like there's that story of the plumber in Dunedin who tragically died because he got myocarditis, and it was brought on by the, it's been ruled by the coroner, it was brought on by the vaccine without question, but he did nothing about it. Like if he had have known, perhaps he could have got to the hospital and still been here. I don't want to trample on his grave or anything, but hey, the cat's with us. The cat always joins us at some stage. What can people do? You've talked about things like blood clotting and cardiac situations. What can people do, or what should people look out for, so that if in 3, 5, 6 months they're aware and they don't just kind of ignore something and then have something worse happen? So can we give them an answer of help rather than a warning of, damnation, so to speak?
Yeah, totally. I mean, some of these things aren't necessarily going to come on, left field. Like things like shortness of breath should be taken seriously to make sure that it's not, a heart problem. And shortness of breath can be from a number of causes. We think it could be a nervous system problem, or it could be a clotty problem, or it could be a heart problem. So just, you just have to be aware that it is best to get checked out for some of these symptoms. Chest pains obviously are problematic symptoms. Yeah. So anything that's like that, or any signs of, trying to return to your normal activities and getting extreme fatigue or pains or any of those things, take it seriously. Take the lazy path for 3 months, for 6 months, whatever you need to do, because we know that your body needs to recover. Just give it time and just don't push through any of these, unusual symptoms, essentially. But, at the end of the day, some of them will be left field and random. This is the point. We don't want it to normalize that COVID-19 is a benign flu. It is nothing like the flu or a standard cold. It absolutely can cause havoc in your body. And so, take it seriously. So rest when you need to, replenish your body when you need to, like all of those sort of, relatively unhelpful things that you just have to do. I mean, relatively, there's no magic bullet, if you like.
Chewy, you're the one that's been involved in this in the last 7 days. Do you have anything specific you want to ask Anna? And then we might go to some of the questions that have come in.
Oh, it is definitely very funny. With me and my wife basically just reminding each other, like, just take it easy. We don't need to charge back to work. And you do sort of go, oh, is that just a little bit heavy in the chest? Is that something? Oh, maybe I'll just lie down for a little bit. Is definitely on our mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, like anything, are we just going to brush that aside in the weeks to come? It's really hard to say. I am trying to recall. I think I'm not sure if it was with yourself a few months back, or whether it was with another researcher, maybe from the University of Otago.
Don't tell Anna we speak to other researchers. You're the only researcher.
You're our only researcher. I'm sorry.
You're the only scientist we speak to, Anna. There's no one else.
He was investigating a link between other viral infections with a long tail,
like glandular fever.
Glandular fever. That's what I was.
Yeah, that was one.
Trying to remember.
Have we not talked about this? Oh, that's another whole topic.
We've definitely spoken about it. I'm just not sure if it was with you, but yeah, I found that really interesting. That people that like, I know people when I went to high school that got absolutely nailed by glandular fever, and other people that just seem to brush it off.
Yes.
And just asking around some of the people that I had known that have got COVID and have been struggling to fight it off. Just that one question: did you have glandular fever, and how did you find it? And people going, yeah, actually, oh.
It's a strong correlation. So people on my study, it's one of the strongest correlations, I think, that people volunteer. They're like, the last time I felt this bad was when I was a teenager with glandular fever. So EBV, 90 to 95% of us get it as children into our teens, and only a small percent of us get glandular fever. Like, people sort of say, oh, I had it, but I didn't know. That means you didn't have glandular fever. You just got infected asymptomatically, just like you can with COVID. So what we're investigating with COVID, like we often think about things like long COVID as the virus causing the problem, and therefore that's what long COVID is. What we're actually investigating is the absolute correlation to our latent viruses. So EBV stays with you for life, just as this whole herpes family do. Gross viruses that stay latent within our bodies, that VZV, chickenpox that comes out as shingles.
Yep.
There's a whole family. Some of them are so understudied that we don't even know what they're doing. And so if they don't manifest, you can't see symptoms. But we know that they're causing havoc. And, my money is on, that these are one of the, at the center of what COVID is doing to us. So what happens is you get an insult to your immune system. Your immune system is trying to fight off this new virus. And it's getting sort of such a workout, if you like, that it's disrupting a normal immune suppression that we take for granted. We're immune suppressing all the time because we have those viruses living in us latently, right? So that's that strong correlation. Like, as in, it could be that the infection, the SARS-CoV-2 infection, unclamps our immune suppression, wakes up our latent viruses, and then starts to cause havoc, and that we can't, that we don't know how to shut that back off. So that's one of the hypotheses. I mean, obviously, there's a whole bunch that all overlap, but that's a strong one. And as you say, a lot of people who suffer or struggled with glandular fever are the ones that seem to be battling with COVID-19. And maybe that's going to come down to a genetic susceptibility, or just a different way that we handle EBV in our teens. Like who gets it and who doesn't, in a kick your butt kind of way.
Yeah.
I had glandular fever when I was at 19, so thanks for that. Fear mongering, all this fear mongering.
Sorry,
I didn't, and I don't often get sick, but always I tend to think that I have a pretty good immune system just generally. But that was always my fear with COVID, is that I'd be one of these people that was asymptomatic and sort of going, well, I'm fine. I feel fine. And just spreading it around. That was my number one fear going into this, working in retail, is that I did not want to spread this to anybody else.
And can I ask this as well? The whole glandular fever thing. Like when I had glandular fever when I was at university, or 18 or 19, whatever it was, and then for the next couple of years when I got sick, it felt like that glandular fever thing again. Yeah. That's sort of what I understand with the long COVID, is that you might get another sickness and you kind of get a recurrence of symptoms such as what you had with COVID. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, but it's almost that it's like having glandular fever. Like, as in, it could, as I say, like it could be that it's reawakening our onboard viruses, but or a combination. There's a large amount of resourcing going into understanding whether that there's bits of virus reservoirs or debris left over from your infection that's keeping your immune system triggered, and that's long COVID as well. But we just don't know enough, or whether there's different types. But certainly there's a strong link to EBV reawakening and causing some of this havoc. It's not everyone. I know someone who, like, I cringed when I was like, oh no, you're a glandular fever kid, and came through it fine. So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just that, it seems very high correlation when a lot of people are telling me that they were the glandular fever kid, and here they are as the long COVID person. Yeah.
I think the good thing about it, the good thing about that for me is that if I feel like getting slack with my mask in a certain situation, it'll be one of the things I remember to go, no, the mask's not a bad, so it's good to have the knowledge. Hey, let's get to some of these questions that have come in, questions and comments, if that's all right. From very much early on when we started talking, Ben says, haven't had it yet, but going into the office most days and using the bus, etc.
He means not masking, etc.
I was going to say Muppet masking, not masking, etc. What are my chances of getting it? So what are the chances of catching it out in the public at the moment? Is there any information around that?
I don't know what the sort of numbers on that, but it's it's not zero, right?
High. Probably the answer is higher than if you were masking. That'd be a fair way to, if your mask is going to be less.
Exactly.
I think this is more of a comment from Jay. Jay says 7 people off work this week, 4 of them. 7 off this week with COVID, 4 of them reinfections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anna kind of speaks to something you talked about with planes. Is there anything else you want to add to it? What about air travel, Anna? Are planes super spreaders? I guess that could mean whether we are a passenger or the planes coming into the country.
I mean, I think planes are still going to be problematic. And it depends on the plane, like, as in, there are points in air travel where there's good air filtration, and there are points at which it's horrific. And you see this with people with their air carbon dioxide monitors on various flights. So it's going to be a risk. With 100% unmasked flight with COVID positive people, it's a risk. Just like it was when we knew that it was happening prior. So and it's definitely going to be coming into the country. Absolutely.
Also, if there were, I'm gonna use the number 50,000. So is that 1% of the population? Because 500 would be 10%. Yeah, that's 1% of the population. If there were 50,000 cases last week, and we extrapolate that, does that therefore mean, every week on the planes, 1% of the people in the planes is probably going to have COVID? And if you're in a flight of 300 people, it could be 3 people statistically speaking, in there with COVID. So
I reckon there's high chance that it depends if you're talking a little plane or a big one.
Yeah.
But it's pretty high chance that there's one person,
Yeah.
But it's hard to say. It's hard to say because, I don't know.
I said to one of my kids who went to a party on Saturday night, I said, what would you do if you knew without question someone in that room had COVID? And she said, well, I wouldn't go. I'm like, oh, good call. But let's say you were in there and you knew without question once you were there, and she said, wear a mask. And I went, yeah, now think about all the people that are in there, and what if one of them has COVID? Mask, easy. So that's still the way around it. Stephen says, kia ora, Anna, can you speak to the weakening of our immune systems with each reinfection?
Yeah, it's an odd thing, this sort of apparent. There's a lot of talk about the sort of weakening of the immune system. I will first say that it's not a blanket thing. Like, I don't think we should all be expecting that when we get infected, we're all getting annihilated immune systems, because that is one of the narratives that's out there. Like, each time you get a hit, you're weakening your immune system. That is a massive extrapolation. I think there are some of us that are going to get a big hit, yes, and and that's going to create the so-called weakening of the immune system. Just that some of us are crap at fighting off infection. So some people will be susceptible to not fighting it off well. So some people will be susceptible to reinfection, and they're susceptible to long-term harms and all the rest of it. And we just never know who that is amongst us. So, there's no level of safe, like as in just, constantly getting reinfected, unless we start studying, these mythical unicorns that maybe are like that. But on the whole, yes, from a generalized point of view, it is not safe to keep getting infected, because we don't know where on that general curve you sit.
Right.
It's just generally, it is a bad idea to keep getting infected, because we don't know the long-term harms that's doing, and we don't know whether a next variant is worse than the last, because we're always catching up with the research. Like, even with the new variants coming out, the first set of data that we started to see, it's all replicated in the laboratory so that you can make an assumption: do we fight this one off, or are we doomed? We're always trying to keep up. So it's that we don't know enough while it's in real time circulating, if you know what I mean. But I would definitely say that it's not, I don't like that doomsday thing that we're all going to have smashed immune systems and we're all just, on our way off a cliff, because that can be some of the narrative that's out there. And I don't see it that way. It's just that you don't know where you sit.
All right. Sai asks, is there anyone working on the ongoing cost to our economy will be from long COVID? Do we have any ideas around that?
Yeah, good question, isn't it? From a ministerial point of view, I don't think, I think there's been official information released that no was their answer. But some of the ministry funded studies, I think there's going to at least be a registry for long COVID, and what that means, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I don't know if that's a voluntary, I have long COVID and this is what it's done to my ability to work and everything. But the only real way to do that is a national survey of everyone, not from a do you have long COVID, because it should just be everyone.
Well, answer me this. The last time we talked in this show, it was like the government came out and said, hey, this long COVID's kind of a thing. And you and me, and I don't know if you were with that on that night, Chewy, but we got together and went, yeah. And the idea was like, well, this has been getting talked about like by people like yourself, Anna, since almost day one, certainly since day one of long COVID. They only just came out like a month or so ago saying, hey, this long COVID, it's kind of a thing. In that
and it's
month,
new,
since
and
that,
it's new and we don't know much. That's the other thing. So,
since they kind of made that statement, I was wondering, has anything changed have you seen anything change in the government to do with long COVID since they kind of finally acknowledged it 2.5 years into COVID?
There's been subtle change movements like, national guidelines about what long COVID is and what to do about it, but it's not enough. Like anyone who, it's not like that the long COVID groups then cheered, because it was like, well, yeah, we know what you've just released. What we're wanting is policy. What we're wanting is financial support. What we're wanting is answers. We need, we can't afford to go to doctors if we can't afford to work. All of those sorts of things are what's absolutely missing. So it was kind of like, yeah, these guidelines you've released, we're all educated already. So, thanks for doing that part. We need some answers to move forward. And if you're not educating about the risks, then it's going to keep going up. This isn't, we don't have our group of long COVID and that's it. Each day that someone gets an infection is an increased risk.
I mean, traditionally, organisations like, or departments, I should say, like ACC, haven't been great at dealing with people dealing with chronic illnesses.
Yeah.
So this is just going to add another ingredient to that awesome pot.
Exactly. So, when we're doing nothing to mitigate limiting the amount of long COVID we have now, it's only going to get bigger. And as you say, chronic illness and disability is not treated very well in this country to start with. And that's been very clear. That's been the loud narrative of the patient support groups is, cool, how do I get help? Like financial, just, even if you are sick for 6 months or 3 months, the lost productivity is huge. And you might not be able to afford that. We're one of the guys in our group is speaking out very publicly saying, I have to sell my house because I can no longer work.
Wow.
Wow.
Any other questions you want to throw out there, Chewy? Anything else you want to pick up? There are more questions, but we've been talking for 40 minutes, Anna, and we didn't mean to. I mean, we love it and we love you, but we don't need to hang on to you for all night long. Oh. So is there anything else you really want to throw out there?
There's an interesting one here from Dave, actually. What about the Australian study showing a connection to the same pathways as Parkinson's and dementia? That's terrifying. I don't like that.
There are strong, the connections to these neurological long-term problems are frightening, and it should be cause for alarm. And because like, again, we're seeing these studies now, like 2.5, 3 years in. A lot of these conditions are something that we consider happening, long term. So it is frightening, that these studies are emerging. So, the message is clear, try not to get infected. Just try not to get infected, because the neurological stuff is not great.
Let's maybe wrap up with this one from John T. It's more of a comment than something else. Interesting, says John T. Glandular fever had wrecked me in the past, and my COVID recovery really wasn't the greatest either. So as you say, maybe it's not everybody, but that was someone just going, haha, there's a light bulb. And someone else, V Bunch. I think we've already answered this, but because we're live, people are joining us as we go through. So maybe we could just say really super quickly again, let's make this definitive and let's make this the last thing, Anna, because it's not what the government's saying in general. So V Bunch says, this is really interesting. Thank you. I haven't had the dirty C word yet, but if/when I do get it, I wonder how long I should isolate. Lots around me have had it, so negative test out is the way to go, I hear. Let's just confirm that one more time, and then we'll wrap it up. So what we're going to say to that, Anna?
Test to exit. Test to exit. Have your rat test. You don't have to test every day and bust through all of your rat tests. Once you know you're positive, wait till your lovely text message that says, woohoo, you're free to go, then test. And maybe don't exit if it's raging positive. There's so many people that are not just weakly positive, they're raging positive. So, take that with a grain of salt. If you're symptomatic, even more, obviously don't rush out of isolation either. But, if everyone took the sort of golden rule of test to exit, you'll find that most people it's 10 days. Is that really going to be a bad thing for you, to lower the risk of someone else getting infection? 10 days versus 7, being courteous. So test to exit is what we've always hoped for. But
let's just expand on that a little bit, because I want to know as well. It might be a bit of a simpleton's question, Anna, but I'm a simpleton. Is there any way that if you rat yourself and you come out as negative, you can still be positive? Like testing to exit, for example, if it comes out as negative, is that kind of a guarantee that you're negative?
it's, oh gosh, nothing's even, it could be because you did it crap,
Right.
Bad swab technique. No, but I mean, there is a strong correlation that if it's showing up on a rat, you're less likely to be infectious. So, as in rat positive correlates with infection, and so therefore if it's negative, you're not likely to be infectious. Yeah.
And just on that as well, we had a question when we were talking to David during the week, but it was a pre-record, so we couldn't ask him. So I just wanted to check the rats, as far as we know, are perfectly good to test and show positives to BQ1 and BQ1.1.
Yeah, I haven't heard. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different brands, and I haven't heard any big failures. I think humans are the failures. You can absolutely do terrible swab techniques. That whole, back.
I hate it.
If anyone's if you're going up your nostril, what are you doing? You're back this way, right? So it's more human error is likely, because the antigen it's picking up is the proteins on the inside. It's not your spike protein that's mutating and all the rest of it. So as far as I'm aware, there's not been any widespread sort of acknowledgement that any of these tests are failing, at least the ones that we have available.
I think I heard Susie Wiles on 7 Sharp one night say, go low and go slow.
Yeah, it's literally, horizontal back. Like, I mean, it's uncomfortable. It's not as painful as it sort of seems or sounds if you just, exactly, go slow. It's a straight, flat back. Nothing to do with your flipping nostril.
It's much lower than you think it is. It's almost like straight back into the face.
Straight. It's horizontal, straight back. Like that.
I find that one of my nostrils I do it quite easily in, and the other one's like trying to push it through a blooming broken cave. And I get it through in there, it won't go. So
if you start losing childhood memories, you've gone too far. Just back it up a bit.
It's kind of like your brain's that way, right? So it's kind of like you're going that way. You feel
almost to the top of your throat.
Yeah, like you're just going straight in back there. So it's more like and that's totally possible. Poor technique. So essentially, if that thing's showing up, at least in a raging positive way, that's alarm bells. Some people are probably more lenient if it's weak, but because a weak is that it's on the way down. But it would just be great if we had test to exit, and everyone I know who is remotely, wants to stay safe, and people around them, everyone's doing test to exit from the very beginning.
So, I mean, the obvious question, and every time I ask you this question, you go, I don't know, but I'm going to ask you again, is if this is the scientific, if this is the good advice, who the fuck is advising the government?
Politics.
Right.
It's always been political. It's a rule that people can, I don't know. There's no real answer to that, because we said this a long time ago that test it to exit would be the safest way to go, and so it is what it is, and it's annoying because it means that some people will be getting infected when they don't understand these things. And one thing just to note on that, the more and more people who are getting access to Paxlovid antivirals, you've got to be even more cautious. And this doesn't get spoken about much because there's not much given out, because everything's difficult to get access to. But essentially, if you go on Paxlovid, and rebound is very common. So, you test negative because you've shut your virus down with antivirals, and some people then go boom and they're off positive again. So you've got to watch out for that as well.
It happened to Joe Biden. He was positive like 2 weeks after he got COVID.
A lot of people on antivirals get a rebound. Yeah,
because my mother got it in the same exposure that I got it, and because of her risk factors, she's on the antivirals as well, so I might pass that on to her. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just good to it's probably mostly related to if you suddenly get a flare up of symptoms. I don't think necessarily the situation where you've cleared it and then you don't know that you're retesting. I think it's literally you rebound, you feel crap again, so you test positive again. It's not, there's not much publicity about this, about the rebound, because it's kind of an odd phenomenon, but it's certainly happening.
Hey, Anna, I think that's us. This has been amazing as always. You've
very,
stormed
very
into our show and you've taken over the whole floor. And I don't think we're going to do any other stories tonight because we're fast approaching 11 o'clock. No, it's always amazing having you. We should have done this on Friday night and actually sold it as a COVID special, but maybe we'll just remember that for the future. We always seem to be able to talk. Is there anything, I mean, we've been talking for 45, 50 minutes. Is there anything that you can think of now that would be good to leave people with? Just as to where we're at right now, where we're moving forward, anything else we need to know that you can think we maybe haven't covered off on?
I think we've covered the key things. Reinfections are a thing. Be mindful. Always care about other people as well. Like that's the society we're in now. It's not just about the risks of death. Our immune systems are amazing at fighting off those serious infections once we're vaccinated, or even once we've had COVID and we've got some immunity. But our immediate protection, the antibody response and how quickly you start kicking the virus out, that wanes. And so, we may get more and more people that are symptomatic and have a more rubbish infection just because it takes longer. It doesn't mean that you get it more seriously or that you're going to, you know what I mean? Like, as in we do have good memory immune responses to the virus for the most part, but it's the fact that we don't know what the collateral damage of the infection is going to do. So therefore, it's not a good idea to keep hammering ourselves. Really, it's all about reducing long-term harms. We know that there's plenty of them, and we don't know what we don't know.
We're going to wrap up now. Stay with us for the wrap up, Anna. You might as well. Because actually, to be honest with you, one of the reasons, not to sound like a dick here, is I don't want to drive Chewy too hard. He's just getting over COVID. Let's wrap up a bit earlier. Let's have an earlier night and let's move on. We were going to be talking about Plunket and Farrier tonight. Chewy, if you decide to come back tomorrow night, we'll just push that off by a night because I think we've covered off everything we need to cover off right now. Yep. As we're heading off, if you've enjoyed the show and you like what we do here, feel free to jump on board and have a look at our Patreon. It's patreon.com/Big Hairy News. There are 6 levels of support you can get on board with if you want to come and support independent media. Lots of different bonuses and privileges and stuff with various levels all the way through there. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And other than that, Anna, it's been amazing. Thank you for joining us again. We will continue to stay in touch. And just to confirm, we don't talk to anybody else about COVID. You're the only person we talk to. So it's
great. No, you've got to get lots of opinion.
Yeah, no, we don't. All right, man. Hey, it's been amazing. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a great show. This information that we've had tonight will be cut up into probably several clips tomorrow. Be up on YouTube. Share them around. Any good information that your parents need to know, your family needs to know, your workmates need to know about where we're at right now. Hashtag share our shit. Get it out there to them, and we will catch you tomorrow night. Actually, Chewy, I should leave you the last word because you're the one person who's had the interaction in the last 7 days. Anything you want to wrap up with before we leave?
Don't get COVID. Fucking shit.
All right, everybody. We'll catch you tomorrow night. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Big Hairy News. Stay safe, wear your mask. Hooroo.